Imagine a courtroom, meant to be a place of law and order, turning into a battleground when a corrupt officer attacks a black woman judge in front of a stunned audience. But what he doesn't realize is that he just messed with the wrong woman. Because this isn't just any judge. This is Judge Naomi Carter, a woman with a past far more dangerous than he could ever imagine. What happens next will leave you speechless. Gunfights. Corruption. Betrayal. And a cop who learns the hard way that he should have picked his battles more wisely. But before we get into it, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. What time is it right now where you are? Let me know in the comments. And if you love thrilling, action-packed stories like this, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And don't forget to share this with your friends, because trust me, they'll want to hear this one. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was heavy with tension. It wasn't the usual kind, this was different. There was an unspoken war brewing, and Judge Naomi Carter could feel it in her bones. She had been presiding over cases for more than 15 years, but today, something felt off. Maybe it was the way Officer Travis Kane, a known racist cop with a long record of brutality, had been glaring at her from the moment she stepped into the courtroom. Maybe it was the way his hand gripped his holster tighter than necessary. Naomi was no ordinary judge. Before her time on the bench, she had been a federal prosecutor and, before that, an Army combat specialist. Many underestimated her because of her petite frame and elegant demeanor. But she was far from defenseless. She had spent years training in hand-to-hand combat, and she had an instinct for danger. As she adjusted her black robe, she cast a glance toward Kane, who stood near the defendant's table. He had been called to testify in a case involving excessive force, where he had beaten a black teenager so brutally that the young boy ended up in a coma. The evidence against Kane was overwhelming, but he sat there, confident, smirking, like he knew something nobody else did. Naomi looked down at the file on her desk. The victim, 17-year-old Jamal Hayes, had been unarmed when Kane had assaulted him. Surveillance footage showed Kane and his partner laughing as they left Jamal's battered body in the street. The courtroom was packed with reporters, activists, and members of the community. Everyone wanted to see justice served. All rise, the bailiff announced. The courtroom stood as Naomi took her seat. Officer Kane, please approach the stand, she ordered. Kane stood up slowly, his smirk never fading. He walked with an air of arrogance, his uniform perfectly pressed, his badge shining under the fluorescent lights. He took the oath and sat down, his cold blue eyes locked onto Naomi's. Officer Kane, she began, her voice steady, you've been accused of using excessive force against an unarmed teenager. The evidence presented shows you struck Jamal Hayes multiple times with your baton even after he was unconscious. Do you deny this? Kane leaned forward, gripping the edge of the witness stand. I did what I had to do, Your Honor. That thug resisted arrest. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Naomi narrowed her eyes. The victim was unconscious, Officer Kane. How does an unconscious person resist arrest? Kane shrugged. He could have been faking it. Naomi clenched her jaw. This man was shameless. Let's review the footage, she said, nodding to the prosecutor. A large screen flickered to life, displaying the brutal beating. The courtroom fell silent as everyone watched Kane and his partner rain down blow after blow on the defenseless teenager. The sound of Jamal's bones cracking echoed in the room. Even the defense attorney looked uncomfortable. Naomi turned her gaze back to Kane. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Kane smirked. Yeah. He should have complied. The crowd erupted in outrage. Naomi slammed her gavel. Order in the court. She turned back to Kane. Officer, this court will not tolerate your blatant disregard for the truth. I will see to it that you are held accountable. Kane's smirk disappeared. A flicker of something dark crossed his face. You think you're tough, huh? You sit up there in your little robe, acting like you got power over me? Naomi's eyes locked onto his. This is my courtroom, Officer Kane. I do have power over you. Kane's face twisted with rage. His fists clenched. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially by a black woman in a position of authority. Before Naomi could respond, a loud bang echoed through the courtroom. Gunfire, screams erupted as people dove for cover. Naomi ducked behind the bench, her heart pounding. More shots rang out, security officers scrambled, drawing their weapons. Naomi peeked over the edge of the bench, her sharp eyes scanning the chaos. Then she saw him, Cain had drawn his weapon and was firing into the crowd, her stomach twisted in fury. He wasn't just a racist cop, he was a monster. The bailiff tried to stop him, but Cain turned and shot him in the chest. The officer collapsed. Blood pooling beneath him, Naomi's breath came fast. Years of training kicked in. She reached under her bench and pulled out the Glock 19 she kept for emergencies. Most judges relied on security, but Naomi had always believed in being prepared. She popped up from behind the bench, leveling the gun at Cain. "Drop your weapon, Cain," she commanded. He turned to her, a cruel grin stretching across his face. "What are you gonna do, Judge? You ain't got the guts." Naomi's grip tightened on the gun. She was a judge, yes, but she had been a soldier first. The courtroom was in chaos. People were screaming, trying to escape. The scent of gunpowder filled the air. Cain raised his gun toward Naomi. Time slowed. Naomi squeezed the trigger. A single shot rang out. Cain dove behind the defense table, dodging the bullet at the last second. He fired back, forcing Naomi to take cover again. She could hear him laughing. "You think you can stop me, Judge? You ain't nothing but a bullet whizzed past Cain's ear, shattering a courtroom window. He cursed and ducked. Naomi kept her breathing steady. She peeked around the bench, her military instincts taking over. Cain was moving toward the exit. She couldn't let him escape. Naomi leaped over the bench, rolling onto the floor just as Cain fired again. The bullet missed her by inches. She hit the ground and fired twice. One shot grazed Cain's arm. He howled in pain, gripping his bleeding limb. "You bitch!" he roared. Naomi was already moving. She had a clear shot, but before she could take it, a door burst open. Cain's backup had arrived. 4 armed men, all in police uniforms, stormed into the courtroom. Naomi's heart pounded. This wasn't just about Cain, this was bigger. She was outnumbered, but she wasn't out of the light. Naomi's pulse hammered in her ears. The 4 officers who stormed into the courtroom weren't just backup for Cain, they were part of his crew. Dirty cops. The kind that covered for each other, planted evidence, and killed without hesitation. The lead officer, a burly man with a square jaw and cold, dead eyes, raised his weapon. "Judge Carter," he sneered, stepping forward. "Drop the gun." Naomi didn't move. Her grip on the Glock 19 remained firm. She had only fired 2 shots, 13 rounds left in the magazine. She'd need every single one. Cain clutched his bleeding arm, staggering behind the defense table. "Shoot her, damn it." "She shot me." The burly officer smirked. "Relax, Cain. We'll handle this." But Naomi wasn't waiting to be handled. She dived behind the jury box, rolling into position as a hail of gunfire exploded from the officers' weapons. Wood splintered, papers flew into the air, and the screams of terrified civilians rang through the room. She took a deep breath. "Count their shots. 1, 2, 3, she listened as the bullets whizzed past. 4, 5, 6, a pause. They were reloading. Naomi popped up from cover, firing 3 quick shots. One officer took a hit to the shoulder, stumbling back with a grunt. Another barely dodged a shot to the chest, diving behind a row of chairs. The remaining 2 kept firing, forcing Naomi to duck again. "This ain't looking good, boys," one of the officers muttered. Cain growled in frustration. "Just kill her already." Naomi clenched her jaw. They wanted her dead. That much was clear. If she didn't fight back with everything she had, she'd never make it out of this courtroom alive. Her mind worked fast. She needed an advantage. She glanced toward the entrance. The courtroom doors were wide open, but the hallway was still chaos. Civilians were scrambling, reporters were screaming into cameras, and security guards were either dead or pinned down. Help wasn't coming. It was all on her. Naomi slid to the other side of the jury box, firing 2 more rounds as she moved. One officer ducked. But the other wasn't so lucky. Her bullet tore through his thigh. He collapsed with a yell. "Damn it, she got me." The other officers cursed. "She's a goddamn judge. Why is she fighting like a damn Green Beret?" Cain, still holding his arm, gritted his teeth. "Because she ain't just a judge, you idiots. She's ex-military." That caught them off guard. Naomi smirked. "Too late for second thoughts now, boys." She spun out from behind cover and emptied 3 more rounds into the chaos. The shots forced the remaining officers to scramble, but one of them managed to return fire. a bullet grazed Naomi's shoulder. She sucked in a sharp breath but didn't let the pain slow her down. She had suffered worse, adrenaline surged through her veins. She needed to end this fast. She spotted a fallen officer's shotgun lying a few feet away. If she could reach it, another round of bullets forced her back into cover. "You're running out of time, Judge," Kane taunted. "You got what, 5 bullets left?" "4. Naomi gritted her teeth. She counted. 6 rounds left, not enough. Her gaze flicked toward the shotgun again. There was only one way to get to it. She had to move. Now, taking a deep breath, Naomi rolled out of cover and sprinted toward the fallen officer's weapon. Bullets ripped through the air, barely missing her as she dove forward, sliding across the marble floor. She grabbed the shotgun just as an officer rushed toward her. She didn't hesitate. She fired a shell point blank into his chest. The impact sent him flying backward, slamming into the defense table before crumpling into a heap. Blood sprayed across the floor. A stunned silence filled the courtroom. Kane's smirk vanished. The remaining officers staggered back. Naomi pumped the shotgun. "Who's next?" she asked, her voice deadly calm. One of the officers hesitated. His gun shook in his hands. She had broken their confidence, but Kane wasn't done. "Kill her," he screamed. "I don't care how. Just do it." The remaining officers charged at Naomi. She fired again. Another officer dropped, his leg blown out from under him, but the last one made it. Before Naomi could swing the shotgun around, he slammed into her, knocking her backward. The weapon skidded across the floor. Naomi hit the ground hard, her vision blurring for a split second. The officer straddled her, pinning her arms. "You had a good run, Judge," he sneered, raising his pistol. Naomi snapped her head forward, slamming it into his nose. The officer howled in pain, momentarily loosening his grip. That was all she needed. Naomi twisted her body, wrapping her legs around his arm in a brutal military hold. She yanked hard. The officer screamed as his arm snapped like a twig. Naomi kicked him off. Scrambling to her feet, Kane was backing away now. He was scared. You crazy bitch." He spat, blood dripping from his mouth. Naomi wiped a trickle of blood from her temple. "You should have thought of that before you started this fight." Kane's eyes darted to the exit. Naomi saw it before he did, his escape route. She wasn't letting him leave this courtroom alive. She reached for her Glock, but a deafening explosion rocked the courthouse. The ceiling shook, dust raining down. Kane's eyes widened in terror. Naomi's stomach twisted. This fight wasn't over. It was only about to get worse. Naomi barely kept her balance as dust and debris rained from the ceiling, coating the blood-streaked floor. The chandeliers above swayed dangerously, and cracks splintered through the marble columns. Kane's wide eyes darted toward the shattered windows. What the hell was that? Naomi's instincts screamed at her. This was no accident. Someone had set off a bomb. Then she heard it, the rapid stomp of combat boots outside. More incoming. Before she could react, a second explosion ripped through the courthouse doors, blowing them off their hinges. The force sent bodies flying, both officers and innocent bystanders who had been caught in the chaos. Through the swirling dust, silhouettes emerged, heavily armed men in tactical gear. Not cops, not military, mercenaries, and they were coming straight for her. Naomi dove behind a row of overturned chairs as gunfire erupted. The mercs didn't hesitate. They opened fire on everyone, cutting down security guards and court personnel in a brutal sweep. A hail of bullets tore through the courtroom, ripping apart wooden desks and shattering glass. She peeked around the corner. 6 of them, moving in formation, wearing black masks and bulletproof vests. These weren't just random thugs. They were trained killers. Kane, still clutching his wounded arm, managed to duck behind the judge's bench, his face twisted in confusion and rage. "What the hell is going on?" One of the mercenaries turned toward him. "Change of plans, Kane. The boss wants her alive." Naomi's blood ran cold. The boss, someone had sent these men for her. Someone bigger than Kane and his corrupt police force, but she didn't have time to figure out who. They were moving in fast. She had to act. She snatched a pistol off a fallen officer, checked the mag, full, then pivoted out of cover and fired 3 quick shots. One mercenary went down, a bullet slamming into his throat. He dropped his rifle, choking on his own blood. The others reacted instantly. Contact. "She's armed." Naomi rolled behind the witness stand, barely dodging the gunfire that followed. A grenade launcher fired, blasting apart the row of chairs she had been behind just seconds earlier. She gritted her teeth. They weren't playing games. A voice crackled over the mercenaries' radios. Secure the judge. If she resists, break her. Naomi's jaw clenched. Like hell, she grabbed a fallen cop's SMG, checking the chamber. One full magazine, good enough. She sprinted across the courtroom, weaving between debris as bullets whizzed past her head. She slid across the floor, raising her weapon, BRRT. She unleashed a burst of automatic fire, mowing down 2 more mercenaries before they could react. Blood sprayed across the judge's podium. The last 3 regrouped, taking cover behind the overturned jury box. Kane was still hiding, watching with wide eyes. This wasn't part of the damn deal. He shouted at the mercenaries. One of them barked back, "Your deal doesn't matter anymore." Kane's face twisted in realization. Naomi smirked. "Looks like your new friends aren't so loyal." Kane snarled, pulling his own gun. "Screw this. I'm getting out of here." He bolted toward the exit, but Naomi had no time to chase him. The mercs were already on the move again. One of them pulled out a flashbang. Naomi's eyes widened. Not good. She threw herself behind cover just as the grenade exploded, sending a deafening shockwave through the room. Her ears rang, her vision blurred. She fought to shake it off. But a massive hand grabbed her by the throat. Before she could react, she was yanked off the ground and slammed against the wall. Pain exploded through her back as a towering mercenary pinned her in place, his massive fingers squeezing her neck. "You should have just surrendered, Judge," he growled. Naomi gasped for air, struggling against his grip. She couldn't reach her gun. The mercenary grinned, raising his free hand. A combat knife gleamed in his fingers. "This is gonna hurt." "Not today." Naomi twisted violently, using her knee to drive into his side. The mercenary grunted, but didn't let go. She went for his wrist, yanking his knife hand just as he tried to strike, redirecting the blade straight into his own thigh. He let out a choked scream, his grip loosening. Naomi snatched his knife, twisting it deeper before ripping it free. Blood gushed from his leg as he stumbled back, cursing. Naomi didn't give him a chance to recover. She grabbed his rifle and emptied an entire magazine into his chest. The giant collapsed in a heap, blood pooling around him. She spun around, shotgun raised, just as the last mercenary grabbed a hostage. Naomi froze. It was Assistant DA Jordan Wells, a young black man who had been in the courtroom for sentencing. The merc pressed a pistol to his temple, dragging him toward the exit. "Drop the gun, Judge, or he dies." Naomi locked eyes with Jordan. Fear shone in his gaze, but he was trying to be brave. She needed to be smarter. Think. The mercenary was moving toward the doors, dragging Jordan backward. Behind him, through the broken glass of the courthouse windows, flashing red and blue lights, backup was finally arriving, but it wouldn't be fast enough. It was up to her. Naomi's grip tightened on her shotgun. She took a slow step forward. "Let him go," she said. Her voice calm but firm. The merc laughed. "Do I look stupid? You drop your gun first." Naomi narrowed her eyes. He was bluffing. If he really wanted her, he wouldn't risk the time it took to kill a hostage. He was panicking. She just needed to push him over the edge. She tilted her head slightly. "You're outnumbered." The mercenary scoffed, but his fingers twitched. Naomi's stance shifted slightly, her finger tightening on the trigger. A 10-second passed. Then, she moved. Her shotgun roared, the slug tearing into the merc's hand, blowing his gun away in a mist of blood. Jordan ripped free, diving aside as Naomi charged forward. She grabbed the merc's arm, twisted, and slammed him face first into the marble floor. He didn't move. Naomi took a slow breath, shotgun still in her grip. The courtroom was silent. Bodies littered the floor. Blood coated the once pristine walls, but it wasn't over, because Kane was still out there. And he was running straight toward whoever had sent these mercenaries. Naomi clenched her jaw. She was going after him. The wail of sirens filled the air as red and blue lights flickered through the shattered courthouse windows. More cops were arriving, but Naomi had no intention of waiting for them. Kane was getting away. She reloaded her shotgun with swift precision, sliding a fresh shell into the chamber. She had to move. Jordan Wells, the assistant DA, staggered to his feet, coughing from the dust and smoke. His hands were still shaking from the near-death experience. "Judge Carter. What the hell just happened?" he gasped. Naomi clenched her jaw. That was the question, wasn't it? First, Kane and his goons had attacked her in her own courtroom. Then, a team of mercenaries had stormed in, trying to abduct her. Someone powerful wanted her eliminated or captured, and she wasn't about to let them succeed. She turned to Jordan. "Get out of here. Stick with the responding officers." Jordan hesitated. "Are you coming with me?" Naomi glanced toward the massive hole where the courthouse entrance used to be. "No," she said, cocking her shotgun. "I have unfinished business." Before Jordan could protest, Naomi sprinted out of the destroyed courtroom, hot on Kane's trail. Outside, the streets of Washington, D.C. were chaos. The courthouse bombing had sent shockwaves through the city. People screamed, sirens blared, and smoke billowed into the night sky. Naomi's boots pounded against the pavement as she spotted Kane in the distance, shoving a man out of his car and stealing it. "Damn it," she muttered. Kane slammed the stolen vehicle into reverse, tires screeching as he sped away, but Naomi wasn't about to let him go. She grabbed a fallen cop's keys off the ground and sprinted toward the nearest squad car. The moment she slid into the driver's seat, she jammed the key into the ignition and roared to life after Kane. High-speed pursuit, the chase tore through downtown D.C., weaving through traffic at breakneck speeds. Naomi gripped the wheel, her eyes locked on Kane's stolen car. He was driving like a madman, swerving between vehicles, running red lights, forcing other drivers off the road. She grabbed the radio. "This is Judge Naomi Carter. I'm in pursuit of a rogue officer. Do not engage, repeat, do not engage. He's mine." The dispatcher on the other end hesitated. "Judge Carter, is this official?" Naomi didn't wait for a response. She slammed the radio down and pressed her foot harder on the gas. Kane wasn't going to get away. He swerved onto a side street, trying to lose her. Naomi followed. Then, gunfire. A black SUV pulled up alongside her, windows rolling down. More mercenaries. They opened fire, bullets riddling her squad car. Naomi ducked low, gripping the wheel as glass shattered around her. Son of a, she yanked the wheel hard, slamming the squad car into the side of the mercenary SUV. Metal crunched. The SUV spun out, nearly colliding with a lamppost. Naomi used the opening to grab her shotgun. Leaning out the window, she fired a slug into the driver's side. The merc at the wheel jerked violently, his head snapping back in a spray of blood. The SUV veered wildly before flipping end over end, crashing into a parked car in a violent explosion. But she couldn't celebrate. Kane was still speeding ahead. Naomi gritted her teeth, shifting gears. She pushed the squad car harder, gaining on him. Then, Kane made a sharp turn down an alleyway. Naomi followed, tires screeching. Her headlights illuminated a chain-link fence up ahead. Kane wasn't slowing down. He slammed through it, the metal collapsing under his car's force. Naomi didn't hesitate. She followed right through. They burst out into an abandoned loading dock behind a warehouse. Kane's stolen car finally skidded to a stop, its tires spinning in place. He jumped out, blood dripping from a wound on his forehead. Naomi braked hard, sending her car into a controlled spin before jumping out herself, shotgun at the ready. Kane pulled his pistol, breathing hard. "You should have just stayed on the damn bench," he spat. Naomi cocked her shotgun. "You should have just done your damn job." The tension between them crackled. Then, gunfire exploded from the warehouse. Naomi dove for cover as bullets rained down on her from the shadows of the loading dock. More mercenaries. Kane wasn't alone. He smirked, backing toward the entrance. "This is bigger than you, Judge." Naomi gritted her teeth, pressing her back against a shipping crate. She could hear footsteps moving through the darkness, multiple shooters. This was an ambush, and she was trapped. She could see Kane running deeper into the warehouse, escaping while his hired guns kept her pinned down. She couldn't let that happen. Naomi waited for a break in the gunfire. Then, she moved, rolling from cover. She snapped her shotgun up and fired 2 quick blasts. 2 mercenaries dropped instantly, their rifles clattering to the ground. The others returned fire, forcing her back behind cover. She switched weapons, grabbing an M4 carbine off one of the fallen mercs. It was fully loaded. Naomi took a deep breath. Then, she charged forward. She fired in controlled bursts, sweeping the area, dropping 3 more mercenaries in quick succession. The last gunman tried to run. Naomi didn't let him. She spun, firing a final burst, taking him out with a precise shot to the spine. The warehouse fell silent. Only the sound of her own breath remained. She looked toward the far end. Kane was gone, but she knew where he was heading. She glanced around, grabbing a mercenary's radio. She turned the dial, listening to the chatter. A voice crackled through. "Target is moving toward the river docks. ETA 5 minutes. Naomi smirked. She had him. She grabbed a fresh magazine, locked it into place, and headed for the docks. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The docks loomed ahead, dark, empty, and deadly silent. Naomi crouched behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, weapon ready. The scent of salt and motor oil filled the night air. She could hear distant footsteps. Kane and his men. The mercenary radio she'd stolen earlier crackled in her earpiece. "Target is en route." Prepare for extraction. Naomi narrowed her eyes. Extraction. Who the hell was pulling Kane out? She wasn't going to let that happen. She checked her M4 carbine, then moved. She slipped between the containers, silent as a shadow. Up ahead, Kane was barking orders at his remaining mercenaries. Hold position. We have 5 minutes till the boat arrives. The dockside floodlights flickered above them, casting eerie glows on the rippling water. Naomi counted 6 men. She took a deep breath. She'd taken on worse. Then, she struck. She stepped into the open, raised her rifle. 3 quick shots, center mass. 2 mercenaries collapsed instantly. The others spun around, weapons raised. Too slow. Naomi dived behind cover as gunfire erupted, bullets slamming into the metal container beside her. Kane's voice roared through the chaos. Kill her. Naomi gritted her teeth, yanked a flashbang from her belt, and tossed it over the crates. The blinding light exploded across the dock. The mercenaries screamed, stumbling backward. Naomi seized the moment. She surged forward, weaving between gunfire, her boots slamming against the wet wooden planks of the dock. She took out another man with a precise shot to the skull. Blood sprayed as his body crumpled. One of the mercenaries, still dazed from the flashbang, swung his rifle toward her. Too late. Naomi grabbed his barrel, yanked it down, and smashed the butt of her own rifle into his face. His nose shattered. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Only 2 men left. She turned, but one of them was already lunging at her. The mercenary tackled her, both of them crashing onto the dock. Naomi hit the ground hard, her rifle skidding away. The mercenary pinned her down, wrapping thick hands around her throat. Naomi struggled, gasping for air. She reached to her side, fingers grasping her knife. With one swift motion, she drove it into the man's neck. His eyes widened in shock. Then his grip loosened. Blood poured from the wound as he tumbled off her. Naomi gasped for breath, pushing herself up. 1 man left. She turned, just in time to see the final merc raising his pistol at her. Her instincts kicked in. She dove forward, grabbing a fallen rifle. A single shot rang out. The mercenary collapsed, a hole between his eyes. Naomi whipped around. Kane was standing there, gun smoking. She froze. Was he helping her? Kane exhaled, lowering his weapon. Guess I need you alive after all. Naomi narrowed her eyes, heart still pounding. What the hell are you talking about? Kane smirked. You'll see soon enough. Then, a loud horn blared. Naomi spun toward the water. A large black speedboat was approaching the dock, cutting through the waves. Its mounted machine gun swiveled in her direction. She had seconds to act. Naomi grabbed the fallen pistol, raised it, and fired 2 quick shots. The gunner dropped before he could fire, but Kane was already making his move. He sprinted toward the boat, leaping onto the deck as it reached the dock. Naomi took off after him, chasing him across the wooden planks, but she was too late. The boat's engines roared, kicking up water as it peeled away from the dock. Kane stood at the back of the boat, grinning. I told you, Judge, he called out. This is bigger than you. Naomi raised her rifle, aiming, but before she could fire, a sniper round struck the dock beside her, splintering wood. She dived for cover. The boat disappeared into the darkness, its engines roaring. Naomi cursed, rising to her feet. Kane had escaped, but she wasn't done with him yet. She grabbed the fallen mercenary's radio, twisting the dial. Static. Then, a voice crackled through. The package is en route. Initiate Phase 2. Naomi's stomach clenched. What the hell was Phase 2? She exhaled, gripping the radio tight. Whatever it was, she was going to find out, and she was going to end it. Naomi stood at the edge of the dock, gripping the stolen radio. The mercenaries were dead. The boat was gone, and Kane had escaped. She clenched her jaw, replaying his last words in her head. This is bigger than you. She needed to find out what Phase 2 meant, fast. A crackle in the radio brought her back to the moment. Package is en route. Initiate Phase 2. Naomi's grip tightened. Then, another voice responded, one she didn't recognize. Understood. The courthouse will be secured within the hour. No one gets in or out. Naomi's blood ran cold. The courthouse. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed a fallen mercenary's car keys, sprinted toward the lot, and jumped into a black SUV. The tires screeched as she tore out of the docks, racing toward the city. The courthouse under siege. The courthouse came into view, and Naomi's stomach dropped. Armed men in tactical gear surrounded the building. Barricades were up. Police sirens flashed, but no officers moved in. It was a full-on hostage situation, and Naomi could see why. Through the courthouse's shattered front windows, she saw figures inside, judges, clerks, officers, trapped, and in the center of it all, Kane. he stood at the top of the grand staircase, a microphone in hand, his voice booming over loudspeakers. This city is broken. Corrupt. It thrives on lies. And the worst lie of all. That a woman like Judge Naomi Cole deserves power over us. The crowd inside shifted nervously. Some were crying. Others were watching in horror. Naomi gritted her teeth. Kane had just made this personal. A SWAT team huddled behind an armored truck outside, but none of them moved. They were hesitating. Naomi stormed over to the SWAT captain. "Why aren't you going in?" The captain hesitated. "They have hostages. The mayor ordered us to stand down." Naomi's patience snapped. "Then stay out of my way." Before he could protest, she grabbed a rifle from a SWAT officer, threw on a tactical vest, and charged toward the building. Storming the courthouse, Naomi kicked open the side door and slipped inside. The halls were dark, silent, except for the distant echo of Kane's speech. She moved quickly, pressing herself against the walls, gun raised. Then, footsteps. 2 mercenaries patrolled the hallway ahead. Naomi moved fast. She lunged, grabbing the first man from behind and slamming his head against the wall. The second turned. Too late. Naomi fired twice. The mercenary collapsed. She grabbed his radio, tuning into their channel. "All units, report in." Another voice answered, unaware they were compromised. "West Wing secure. Holding civilians." Naomi's mind raced. Civilians. That meant multiple hostages. She needed to move, fast. Gunfight in the courtroom. Naomi reached the courtroom doors. She took a deep breath, then kicked them open. Inside, chaos. Hostages huddled together, hands on their heads. 4 mercenaries patrolled the aisles, rifles raised, and at the judge's bench, Kane. Naomi didn't hesitate. 2 mercenaries dropped before they could react. The others spun around, opening fire. Naomi dived behind a row of wooden benches as bullets shredded through them. She rolled to the side, raised her rifle, and fired. 1 mercenary's head snapped back, gone. The last man tried to run. Naomi put him down with a clean shot to the spine. Silence. Then, applause. The hostages were cheering. Naomi ignored them. She locked eyes with Kane, and for the first time, he looked nervous. Kane's cocky smirk was gone. For the first time, he wasn't in control. Naomi stepped forward, gun raised, her boots echoing in the courtroom's eerie silence. The hostages stayed low, watching in terrified awe. Kane's fingers twitched toward his holster. Naomi narrowed her eyes. "Try it." Kane's hand froze mid-air. Then, the skylight above exploded as a stun grenade dropped straight into the courtroom. A blinding light filled the room, followed by an ear-splitting bang. Naomi instinctively shielded her eyes, staggering back. Gunfire erupted. More mercenaries dropped from the ceiling, rappelling down. The hostages screamed. Naomi's vision blurred, her ears ringing, but she forced herself to move. She hit the ground just as bullets rained down, shattering benches and sending papers flying. Kane had used the distraction to escape. Naomi cursed, rolling behind the judge's bench as the mercenaries opened fire. She had seconds to react. She yanked a flashbang from her vest, pulled the pin, and tossed it over the bench. The room flashed white again, screams echoing. Naomi popped up from cover, rifle aimed. 3 mercenaries dropped instantly. The remaining 2 tried to retreat, but Naomi was faster. She swung over the bench, grabbing one by the collar, and slammed his face into the wooden table. Blood splattered. The last man raised his weapon, but Naomi was already swinging. Her boot connected with his wrist, sending the gun flying. She grabbed him by the vest and threw him into the jury box. He hit the wood hard and didn't move. Silence. The gunfight was over. Naomi turned toward the hostages. "Run. Now." They didn't hesitate. One by one, they bolted for the exits. The final chase. Naomi rushed to the shattered window, spotting Kane sprinting toward a black SUV outside. Not this time. She ran after him, jumping through the broken glass. She landed hard on the pavement, rolling to her feet. Kane was already in the driver's seat, starting the engine. Naomi raised her rifle. Her bullets shattered the windshield, but Kane ducked, slamming the gas. The SUV screeched forward. Naomi didn't hesitate. She sprinted after it, weaving through parked cars. A nearby motorcycle sat idling, keys still in the ignition. Naomi vaulted onto it, revved the engine, and tore off after Kane. The city blurred around her as she sped onto the highway. Ahead, Kane's SUV weaved between cars, trying to lose her. Naomi gritted her teeth, leaning low as bullets tore past her. Kane's men were firing from the back seat. She swerved, gripping the handlebars tighter. She needed to end this. She reached for her sidearm, steadied her aim. One of the shooters slumped forward, his rifle clattering onto the road. Kane's SUV swerved violently. Naomi gunned the throttle. Closing the distance, then, Kane did the unexpected. He slammed on the brakes. Naomi's eyes widened. She had half a second to react. She yanked the handlebars to the side. The bike spun out. Naomi crashed onto the pavement, rolling hard. The asphalt burned against her skin. Her gun skidded away. She came to a stop, coughing, pain exploding through her body. Kane stepped out of the SUV, gun raised. "You just don't know when to quit, do you, Judge?" Naomi gritted her teeth, pushing herself up. This wasn't over, not even close. Naomi's body screamed in pain, but she refused to stay down. Her palms were scraped raw, her vision swam, but she locked eyes with Kane. He stood a few feet away, gun aimed directly at her head. Around them, traffic had ground to a halt. Terrified drivers ducked behind their cars, staring in horror at the unfolding showdown. Kane cocked his pistol. "This is where you die, Judge." Naomi's mind raced. Her gun was too far to reach. She needed to make him hesitate. She smirked, blood dripping from her lip. "You talk too much." Kane's face twisted in rage. He moved his finger toward the trigger. Naomi dived to the side as a bullet whizzed past her. She rolled, grabbed a shard of broken glass from the wreckage, and flung it. The jagged glass sliced across Kane's cheek. He staggered back, cursing. Naomi launched herself forward. Before Kane could fire again, she grabbed his wrist, twisting it hard. His gun clattered onto the pavement. He threw a wild punch, but Naomi blocked it, driving her knee into his ribs. Kane grunted, stumbling, but he was quick. He lunged, wrapping his arms around Naomi and slamming her into the ground. Pain exploded through her back. She gritted her teeth, ignoring it. Kane climbed on top of her, hands wrapping around her throat. Naomi gasped as air was cut off. Her vision darkened, but she still had one free hand. She reached toward her ankle holster and pulled her hidden knife. With all her strength, she drove the blade into Kane's shoulder. Argh. Kane howled in agony, rolling off her. Naomi sucked in air, coughing violently. She staggered to her feet, yanking the knife free. Kane clutched his shoulder, glaring at her. Then, suddenly, tires screeched behind them. A black van skidded to a stop. The doors burst open. More mercenaries poured out, rifles raised. Naomi gritted her teeth. She was outnumbered, but she didn't care. She grabbed a fallen pistol, turned, and opened fire. Highway shootout. Naomi dropped the first two gunmen before they even aimed. The others scattered for cover, returning fire. Bullets tore into nearby cars, shattering windshields. Naomi ducked behind a flipped motorcycle, reloading. She peeked out, too late. A mercenary rushed her, gun raised. Naomi lunged low, sweeping his legs out from under him. He hit the pavement hard. She grabbed his rifle, snapping his neck in one brutal twist. No time to rest. Another mercenary charged forward. Naomi whirled, blasting him point blank. Blood splattered against the road. She grabbed his ammo, diving behind a wrecked car. More gunmen advanced. Kane, still clutching his wounded shoulder, shouted, "Kill her already." The mercenaries moved in. Naomi breathed heavily, gripping the rifle tighter. She was running out of time and bullets. She needed a way out, fast. The police arrived. Suddenly, a dozen police cruisers roared onto the highway. Tires screeched. Doors flew open. Officers poured out, guns drawn. Freeze. The mercenaries hesitated. Naomi took advantage. She burst from cover, firing the last of her rounds. Two more mercenaries crumpled. The remaining gunmen panicked, diving into the van. The driver slammed the gas. Naomi fired at the tires, but missed. The van sped away, disappearing into the night. Kane was gone. Again, Naomi lowered her weapon, breathing heavily. The police officers rushed forward, surrounding her. "Judge Cole. Are you all right?" Naomi wiped blood from her chin. "I'll live." She turned to watch the highway, the city lights glowing in the distance. She wasn't finished, not even close. Naomi's heart raced, but her mind was clear. This was far from over. The police had arrived just in time, but the mercenaries had already scattered, and Kane was still out there. She scanned the chaotic scene, feeling a rush of adrenaline mixed with frustration. The hostages were safely escorted away by officers, but Naomi knew she couldn't afford to rest. She turned toward the officer who had approached her. His eyes were filled with both concern and respect. "Judge Cole, we've got your back," he said, his voice tight. "We'll take care of this from here." Naomi shook her head. "No," she said, her voice cold. "This isn't over. Kane's still out there, and he'll be back. They never just disappear." The officer frowned, but Naomi could see the conflict in his eyes. "You're hurt, I'm fine." Naomi cut him off, her jaw tightening. She couldn't afford to waste time. Cain had attacked her, and he wouldn't stop until he had some kind of twisted revenge, and Naomi had a feeling he'd already planned his next move. The officer reluctantly nodded. "All right. But you're not going after him alone." Naomi shot him a look, and he quickly added, "We'll be in the field, too. We'll work together." She hesitated for a moment, then gripped her sidearm tightly. "Let's go." The hunt begins. The next few hours passed in a blur of action. Naomi, along with a small team of officers, gathered in a secure command center set up just outside the city. The officers had connected the dots. Cain had deep ties to organized crime, and he wasn't just some rogue cop. He had resources, men, and connections that stretched far beyond the courtroom attack. They reviewed every bit of intel, every lead, trying to figure out where Cain would strike next. Naomi's eyes scanned the maps of the city, tension radiating off her. She refused to let Cain get away. The police had already taken over traffic cameras, and Naomi's team was going through every surveillance feed. One officer pointed to a flashing red dot on the map. There. Cain's SUV was spotted heading toward the warehouse district. Naomi stood up immediately. "We're going." The officer started to protest, but Naomi overrode him. She was the one who knew Cain best now, and he wasn't getting away again. The warehouse standoff. The team arrived at the warehouse district just as night began to fall. The lights in the area were dim, casting long, eerie shadows over the abandoned buildings. Naomi's heart pounded as they moved in, each step bringing them closer to Cain. She checked her weapon one last time, making sure it was ready. They crept toward the closest warehouse, hearing the faint sound of voices inside. Cain's voice rang out, low, sharp, and laced with anger. "Get it ready," he was saying. "We're leaving the city. Fast." Naomi motioned for the team to stay down. They weren't going in blind, they'd wait for the perfect moment. Then, gunfire echoed. One of the officers had moved too quickly. Cain's men opened fire, and the warehouse erupted into chaos. Naomi's instincts kicked in, and she dove behind a nearby crate. Shots rang out, hitting the walls around her. Naomi popped up, firing 3 quick shots at the mercenaries. One of them dropped, but the others returned fire, forcing her back behind cover. Her pulse raced as she reloaded. The pressure was mounting. Naomi peeked out. Cain wasn't far, and the gunfire was escalating. The officers had taken positions, but this was no longer just a rescue operation. This was war, showdown in the dark. Naomi ducked low, her mind racing as she calculated her next move. The warehouse was large, filled with stacks of crates and old machinery. Perfect for cover, but also dangerous if they didn't move fast. She turned to the officer nearest to her. "Cover me. I'm going after Cain." The officer gave her a quick, nervous nod, but she saw the worry in his eyes. Naomi didn't care. She darted forward, using the crates for cover, her movements swift and calculated. Gunfire tore through the air as she ducked low and fired back at the mercenaries. The sound of a blazing firefight filled the warehouse, and Naomi's pulse quickened. She was close, she could feel it. Then, she saw him, Cain. He stood near the back of the warehouse, his hand on a duffel bag. His men were scattered, covering him, but he wasn't looking at her. She had one shot. Without hesitation, Naomi fired, her bullet piercing one of the mercenaries' skulls. The man collapsed instantly, and Cain finally looked up, his eyes locked with hers, a cocky grin spreading across his face. "You think you can stop me?" Naomi stepped forward, gun aimed straight at him. "We'll see." The tension in the air was thick as Naomi and Cain stared each other down, the distant sound of gunfire still echoing in the background. Naomi's grip tightened around her weapon, and she slowly advanced, keeping her eyes fixed on Cain. He stood in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by the bodies of his fallen men. He didn't seem the least bit rattled. A cold smile crept across his face, and he raised his hand slightly, as if to mock her. "Come on, Judge. You really think you can stop me?" He sneered. Naomi didn't flinch. "No. But I'll sure as hell try." Her voice was low and filled with a ruthless resolve. Cain's grin widened, and he stepped backward toward a large crate. He seemed unbothered, almost as if he was waiting for something, and Naomi knew, this wasn't over. The tension breaks. Before she could react, a sudden explosion of gunfire erupted from behind the crate. Naomi ducked and rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the barrage of bullets. Her ears rang with the sound of the gunfire, and her instincts kicked in as she returned fire at the mercenaries hiding behind the crates. Her shots rang out with precision, and 2 more men collapsed to the floor, their weapons dropping from their hands. Cain took advantage of the distraction, sprinting to the far corner of the warehouse, using the smoke and chaos to cover his retreat. Naomi quickly assessed the situation, she couldn't let him get away. But as she moved to pursue, she was met with more gunfire, her heart raced, but her training took over. She dove behind a stack of crates, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. She knew she was running out of time. If Kane got to his car, he'd be gone. Naomi squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, steadying her breathing. She had to focus. The chase. She peeked over the top of the crates just as Kane disappeared into the shadows. Not today. Naomi launched herself from cover, moving quickly and with purpose. She fired once, then twice, her shots distracting Kane's remaining men. The sound of gunfire rang out once more as she moved, but Naomi was focused. She didn't let the bullets flying past her deter her. She could hear Kane's footsteps now. He was near the exit. Don't let him get away. Naomi shouted to the officers who were still regrouping. They nodded, but Naomi knew she was on her own. She raced toward the exit, using every bit of speed she could muster, determined to corner Kane before he could escape. Kane heard her footsteps behind him and turned, pulling a gun from his waistband. He fired, but Naomi was faster. The bullet grazed her arm, and she winced in pain, but she didn't stop. She was too close now. With a roar of anger, Naomi sprinted forward, closing the distance between her and Kane. Naomi tackled Kane with full force, her body crashing into his as they both hit the ground. The force of the impact knocked the gun from his hand, and they both scrambled to grab it. Kane tried to punch her, but Naomi was quick. She blocked the blow and landed a powerful jab to his ribs. The pain flashed across his face, but he didn't back down. Instead, he kicked her, knocking her back against the cold concrete floor. Naomi gasped for breath, but she didn't hesitate. She rose to her feet, blood dripping from the cut on her arm, and moved in again. This time, she grabbed the gun from the floor, pointing it at him with deadly precision. Kane sneered at her. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You're just a judge." Naomi's eyes burned with fury. "I'm more than that," she snarled, her voice cold. "And you're going to regret messing with me." She tightened her grip on the trigger, her aim unwavering. Kane's bravado faded, and for the first time, there was a flicker of fear in his eyes, but Naomi didn't pull the trigger. Her chest heaved as she took a step back, keeping her gun trained on Kane. She had him. But she needed to be sure. Naomi keyed her radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "This is Judge Naomi Cole. I need backup." Kane secured. "Get a team to me now." Within moments, the call was answered. The waiting game. Naomi didn't lower her weapon as the backup team arrived, storming into the warehouse with guns raised. Kane was cuffed and led away without resistance, his earlier arrogance replaced by defeat. Naomi's body was aching, but she felt a sense of satisfaction. Kane was finally off the streets. The city was safer, but something gnawed at her. She hadn't anticipated how personal this fight would become. She had expected an attack on her career, but not this. Not a shootout. She glanced at the officers as they swarmed the area. They were tired, but they had made it through together. Hours later, as the dust settled and the city returned to some semblance of normal, Naomi was seated in a hospital room, getting patched up. Her arm was bandaged, but it wasn't life-threatening. Her mind wandered as she stared out the window. Kane was in custody, but she knew this wouldn't be the last time she'd have to face the corruption and violence lurking beneath the surface. She was just getting started. The following morning, Naomi sat at her desk, the weight of the last 24 hours still heavy on her shoulders. The adrenaline had worn off, but the lingering effects of the night's events kept her in a state of tension. Kane was behind bars, but something gnawed at her. The attack had been brutal and unexpected, but it was only the surface of something far deeper. She could feel it in her bones. The city was on the edge, and Kane was merely a puppet in a much larger scheme. She stared at the files in front of her, investigations, court cases, and sensitive intel. Her phone buzzed, and she instinctively grabbed it, her eyes scanning the screen for any updates. The message was from her most trusted source within the department. "Naomi, there's more to Kane than we thought. Check out the new intel. It's big." Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the first time P had dropped a cryptic message, but this one felt different. The message seemed urgent, and her instincts told her to act fast. She dialed P's number without hesitation, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed the call button. The phone rang several times before a low voice picked up. "Naomi." "P, what's going on?" "I don't have much time," P replied, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. Kane isn't just some rogue cop. He's connected to something bigger. I've been digging, and it's worse than we thought. You need to look deeper into the financials and the network of people he's been working with. Naomi's brow furrowed. What kind of network? A criminal syndicate, Naomi. They've infiltrated the local police and higher up. It's a massive operation. And Kane's just the tip of the iceberg. She felt a chill run down her spine. Corruption within the force wasn't new, but this felt different. How do you know this? Naomi asked. I've got proof. But it's sensitive. I can't send it through regular channels. Meet me at the safe house tonight. I'll give you everything. The line went dead before Naomi could respond. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in around her, tightening like a noose. The city felt like it was on the edge of chaos. And she was standing right at the center of it. She couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut telling her that this was more than just a random attack. By late evening, she was in her car, headed toward the safe house. Every nerve in her body was on high alert. As she drove through the empty streets, the world around her seemed silent, almost too quiet. She checked the rearview mirror constantly, expecting to see someone tailing her. It wasn't long before she arrived at the safe house, a rundown building on the outskirts of the city. It was isolated and perfect for their purposes. Naomi parked her car in the darkened alley and stepped out, scanning the area. She was used to danger. But tonight felt different. The air felt thick with tension, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The safe house door creaked as she pushed it open, stepping inside. P was already there, sitting at a small table in the dimly lit room. He didn't say a word as she entered. Instead, he motioned for her to sit. I've got something you need to see, P said, sliding a folder across the table. This is everything we've got on Kane's connections. The money trail, the deals, the names. It's all here. Naomi opened the folder, scanning the documents. The more she read, the more her stomach twisted. The connections were deeper than she had anticipated. Kane had been a part of a vast criminal enterprise. And his ties to the syndicate stretched across the city, even further, but then she saw it, a name she recognized. Her breath caught in her throat. P, Naomi said quietly, this can't be right. P looked at her with a grim expression. I wish it weren't. But it's true. That name, he's been pulling strings from behind the scenes. And if he's involved, it means everything we know is about to change. Naomi's mind raced. If the man she suspected was behind all this, it meant that even the people she trusted the most could be compromised. She had to make a choice, and fast. Without wasting a moment, Naomi grabbed the folder, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't stay here. She had to act quickly, but she couldn't do it alone. P was in danger now, too. She glanced at him one last time, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. Get out of here, she said to him urgently. They'll be coming for us. You need to disappear for a while. P's eyes hardened, but he didn't argue. I'll be in touch. Naomi turned and headed for the door, but just as she reached for the handle, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. Her senses went into overdrive. She spun around just in time to see two masked men stepping out from the shadows. They were armed. Naomi instinctively reached for her gun, but before she could draw it, one of the men shot at her. She dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the bullet, and returned fire in an instant. The first man went down, but the second one was already on her, his gun raised. In a split second, Naomi ducked behind the table, the sound of bullets hitting the walls around her. She could feel the adrenaline flooding her system, her training taking over. She wasn't going down without a fight. With a swift move, Naomi slid across the floor, aiming her gun at the man who was closing in on her. She shot. He collapsed to the floor, his weapon falling from his hands. Naomi stood up, breathing heavily, her heart racing. She had just narrowly escaped death, but she knew this was far from over. The syndicate wasn't going to let her walk away so easily. A new war begins. The world had just shifted under Naomi's feet, and now there was no going back. Naomi picked up the folder again, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just fighting for justice anymore, she was fighting for her survival. The battle was far from over, and as she glanced back at the safe house, she knew this would be the beginning of a new war, and she was ready. Now, I want to hear from you. What was your favorite part of this story? Did anything surprise you? What would you have done in Judge Naomi's place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this. Share this video with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.